There are moments in life when you quietly wonder whether something invisible is standing between you and the reality you long to live. You have read the books, tried to think positively, maybe even whispered your intentions to the night before falling asleep, and yet the results feel inconsistent, distant, or painfully slow. What if the issue has never been your desire, your effort, or even your worthiness, but the frequency from which you are living? What if manifestation is not about asking harder, but about becoming coherent with what you are asking for? Today, we enter a deeper understanding of the power of quantum manifestation, how to use the energetic frequency of the universe to manifest your greatest desires, quickly and efficiently in just a few steps. Not as a fantasy, not as a motivational slogan, but as a lived internal process that begins in your nervous system, travels through your emotional body, and subtly reorganizes the way reality responds to you. Many people feel spiritually disconnected, as if the universe has gone silent. Others carry frustration from years of trying to manifest abundance, love, or clarity without visible change. This video is an invitation to pause and reconsider what manifestation truly is. Before we move forward, take a moment to like, subscribe, and share this message with someone who feels stuck in their own becoming. Because what we are about to explore is not about chasing outcomes, it is about learning how to align your inner signal with the field of infinite possibility that has always been responding to you. The invisible architecture of energetic frequency. Beneath every visible result in your life, there is an invisible architecture quietly organizing your experiences. This architecture is not built from effort alone, nor from desire repeated like a mantra, but from frequency, an emotional and neurological pattern that becomes your silent signature in the world. Many people attempt to change their circumstances while remaining anchored in the same internal state that created them. They seek abundance while feeling scarcity in their chest. They long for love while rehearsing memories of rejection. They ask for clarity while living in chronic mental noise. The contradiction is subtle, yet powerful. Energetic frequency is not a mystical abstraction floating somewhere beyond you. It is the sum of your repeated thoughts, the emotions your body has memorized, and the meaning you assign to your past. When certain emotions are experienced long enough, resentment, disappointment, anxiety, the body begins to treat them as familiar territory. Over time, this emotional baseline becomes your identity. You no longer feel anxious. You become someone who lives in a slightly anxious state. And from that state, you interpret opportunities, relationships, and even neutral events through a lens that confirms the frequency you are broadcasting. In this sense, manifestation is less about attracting something new and more about reorganizing the internal pattern that determines what feels natural to receive. When your nervous system is wired for survival, it searches for threats. When it is wired for lack, it notices what is missing. When it is wired for coherence, it begins to perceive possibilities that were always present but previously filtered out. What changes first is perception. What changes next is behavior. What changes last is the external result. Yet because we only measure reality by what we can see, we often abandon the process before the deeper shift stabilizes. There is also a silent dissonance many people carry between what they consciously desire and what they unconsciously expect. You may say you want prosperity, but internally anticipate struggle. You may envision a harmonious relationship, yet carry unresolved grief that whispers, "This never lasts." That internal whisper is not weakness, it is stored experience. However, when unexamined, it becomes a directive signal. The body cannot distinguish between a memory vividly relived and a present moment experience. If the body is repeatedly immersed in emotions tied to limitation, it continues to emit a signal consistent with limitation. This is why so many feel spiritually exhausted. They attempt to manifest from the surface of intention, while ignoring the deeper current of emotional conditioning. The universe, or the field of life, does not respond to words. It responds to coherence. Coherence occurs when thought, emotion, and expectation move in the same direction. It is like tuning an instrument. If one string is slightly off, the melody feels strained, even if the notes are technically correct. Consider how the body responds when you recall a painful event. Your heart rate may subtly change. Your breathing shifts, muscles tighten, Now imagine living in that physiological state daily while trying to create a future built on expansion and trust. The internal chemistry communicates safety or danger long before conscious intention enters the picture. When your internal environment is regulated, when the body feels safe enough to release old narratives, your frequency shifts naturally, not through force, but through alignment. Energetic frequency, then, is not something you fake. It is something you cultivate by gently becoming aware of the emotions you rehearse, the stories you protect, and the sensations you avoid. As awareness deepens, the invisible architecture begins to reorganize. And as it reorganizes, reality slowly mirrors that internal order. Manifestation stops feeling like a struggle against circumstances and begins to feel like a quiet cooperation with life itself. Emotional coherence and the silent sabotage. There is a subtle fracture that often lives between desire and emotion, and it is within this fracture that manifestation quietly dissolves. On the surface, a person may speak confidently about the life they wish to create. They describe abundance, fulfillment, meaningful relationships, or a renewed sense of purpose. Yet beneath those words, the emotional body may still be anchored in disappointment, fatigue, or a long-standing belief that life requires struggle. This emotional undercurrent is rarely dramatic. It is often quiet, familiar, and deeply ingrained. Emotional coherence is the state in which your inner world moves in one direction. Thought, feeling, and expectation align without internal contradiction. When coherence is present, there is a calm certainty that does not require external proof. It feels steady rather than euphoric, grounded rather than inflated. In contrast, emotional dissonance creates friction. A person may visualize prosperity while simultaneously feeling tension about unpaid bills. They may imagine a loving partnership while holding unprocessed resentment from past relationships. The nervous system becomes divided, and that division subtly shapes perception and behavior. Many individuals who feel frustrated with manifestation are not lacking intention. They are carrying unresolved emotional patterns. The body stores emotional memory with remarkable precision. An experience of rejection from years ago can still influence how safe it feels to open the heart today. A childhood environment marked by instability can shape the way security is perceived in adulthood. These stored imprints operate below conscious awareness, yet they influence the frequency that is expressed in daily life. When an intention is set from the mind, but not integrated into the emotional body, the signal sent into the world is inconsistent. It resembles a radio station that shifts between two frequencies. The message becomes distorted, not because the universe is indifferent, but because the internal broadcast lacks clarity. Emotional coherence is not about forcing positivity or suppressing doubt. It is about acknowledging the emotions that remain unresolved and allowing them to be integrated rather than denied. There is also a quiet form of self-protection that many carry. After repeated disappointments, the psyche may adopt a defensive posture. Hope feels risky. Expansion feels vulnerable. In this state, the individual may unconsciously lower expectations to avoid future pain. While this strategy once served as protection, it now becomes a barrier. The heart cannot fully open to possibility while simultaneously bracing for loss. This internal brace creates tension that subtly shapes decisions, tone of voice, posture, and even the opportunities one feels worthy of pursuing. Emotional coherence begins to emerge when the body feels safe enough to release its habitual defenses. Safety does not arise from external guarantees. It arises from inner regulation. When breathing deepens, when awareness rests gently in the present moment, when old narratives are observed without judgment, the nervous system gradually shifts from survival to stability. In this regulated state, the emotional signal becomes clearer. Desire no longer feels like longing from lack, but like a natural extension of identity. The field of manifestation responds to identity more consistently than to fleeting wishes. When you emotionally inhabit the version of yourself who is aligned, capable, and open, reality begins to reflect that internal posture. Opportunities that once seemed intimidating feel approachable. Conversations unfold differently. Decisions are made from clarity rather than fear. The change is not theatrical, it is organic. Emotional coherence reduces internal noise, and in that quiet space, the path forward becomes more visible. Silent sabotage does not originate from weakness. It originates from unexamined emotion. When those emotions are acknowledged and integrated, the fracture between desire and experience begins to close. Manifestation then becomes less about convincing life to respond and more about allowing your internal state to stabilize into the frequency that naturally attracts what once felt distant. Rewriting the inner narrative and the biology of belief. Deep within the human experience, there is a narrative constantly unfolding. It is not always spoken aloud, yet it shapes perception, expectation, and even the chemistry of the body. This narrative is built from memories, interpretations, cultural conditioning, and the meaning assigned to past events. Over time, it solidifies into belief, and belief, when repeated emotionally, becomes biology. The body adapts to the stories the mind rehearses. When someone repeatedly tells themselves that life is difficult, the nervous system calibrates around vigilance. Muscles hold subtle tension. Breathing becomes shallow. The mind scans for confirmation. The body does not debate whether the story is accurate. It organizes itself around consistency. In this way, belief is not simply a mental concept. It becomes a physiological state. Hormones, neural pathways, and even posture align with what is repeatedly felt and assumed to be true. The process of manifestation intersects directly with this biological adaptation. If the body is conditioned to expect disappointment, it unconsciously resists opportunities that contradict that expectation. A promising possibility may arise, yet hesitation surfaces. Doubt whispers quietly, not as a dramatic voice, but as a subtle contraction in the chest. The individual may interpret this contraction as intuition, when in reality, it is often the nervous system defending a familiar narrative. Rewriting the inner narrative does not mean denying the past. It means reinterpreting it with awareness. An experience of failure can be framed as evidence of inadequacy, or it can be understood as refinement. A period of financial struggle can become proof of limitation, or it can become a chapter of resilience. The event remains the same. The meaning shifts. When meaning shifts, emotional tone shifts. When emotional tone shifts, the body responds differently. There is a profound connection between imagination and physiology. When a memory is vividly recalled, the body reacts as if the event is occurring again. The same occurs with envisioned futures. If a future scenario is imagined with clarity and emotional presence, neural pathways begin to fire in patterns similar to real experience. The body starts to familiarize itself with a state it has not yet physically lived. In this sense, imagination becomes rehearsal, not as fantasy, but as preparation. However, the effectiveness of this internal rehearsal depends on emotional sincerity. If the mind visualizes abundance while the body remains anchored in doubt, the rehearsal lacks depth. The new narrative must be introduced gradually, with compassion for the resistance that surfaces. Resistance is often the echo of past experiences that once required protection. When that resistance is met with patience rather than force, the nervous system begins to soften. Belief shifts rarely occur through intellectual persuasion alone. They occur through repeated emotional experiences that contradict old assumptions. Small moments of evidence accumulate. A new opportunity is embraced. A conversation unfolds differently. A boundary is expressed without collapse. Each of these experiences becomes data for the brain, suggesting that a new narrative is possible. Over time, the biology reorganizes. The body begins to feel safe in expansion. The relationship between belief and manifestation is intimate. The world often mirrors what feels internally true. When worthiness is integrated, opportunities no longer feel intimidating. When abundance feels natural rather than distant, decisions align with growth rather than contraction. The shift may appear gradual from the outside, yet internally it feels like a quiet liberation. Rewriting the inner narrative is not about constructing a perfect story. It is about releasing the unconscious allegiance to a limiting one. As belief evolves, the biology adapts. As the biology adapts, frequency stabilizes. And when frequency stabilizes around coherence rather than contradiction, manifestation ceases to feel like an effort to overcome reality and begins to feel like an extension of who you are becoming. Embodying the future self and the rhythm of aligned action, there is a version of you that already exists beyond hesitation, beyond the weight of old disappointments, beyond the identity shaped by survival. This version is not imaginary in the sense of being unreal. It is a potential configuration of thoughts, emotions, and behaviors waiting to be stabilized. When people speak of the future self, they often treat it as a distant figure to be reached someday. Yet in the deeper mechanics of manifestation, the future self is a frequency that can be inhabited now, in subtle and practical ways. To embody the future self is not to pretend that challenges do not exist. It is to shift the internal posture from which those challenges are met. The individual who sees themselves as capable responds differently to uncertainty than the one who sees themselves as perpetually behind. The person who feels internally abundant approaches opportunities with curiosity rather than desperation. These differences are not merely psychological. They alter tone of voice, body language, timing, and the willingness to engage with possibility. Aligned action emerges naturally from this embodied frequency. When identity shifts, behavior follows without force. If someone genuinely feels worthy of meaningful relationships, they communicate differently. If someone internally integrates the belief that prosperity is accessible, they approach financial decisions with a steadier hand. Action taken from coherence feels grounded and intentional. Action taken from lack often feels urgent or strained. Many individuals attempt to manifest solely through mental focus, forgetting that the body must participate. The body carries habits of movement, posture, and reaction that reflect identity. A contracted posture subtly communicates defensiveness. A tense jaw reflects internal pressure. When the body remains locked in past conditioning, the signal transmitted into the world carries that tension. Embodiment involves allowing the physical self to align with the internal vision. Breathing deepens, shoulders relax, movements slow down and become deliberate. These shifts may appear small, yet they communicate a different energetic rhythm. There is also a rhythm to aligned action that contrasts with impulsive striving. When the nervous system is regulated and the inner narrative is evolving, decisions arise from clarity rather than fear. Opportunities are evaluated with discernment instead of urgency. This rhythm resembles the steady flow of a river rather than the erratic rush of a storm. From the outside, it may not look dramatic. Internally, it feels sustainable. The future self does not live in constant excitement. Instead, there is a quiet confidence that permeates daily routines. Morning rituals carry presence rather than distraction. Conversations are entered with attentiveness rather than preoccupation. Even setbacks are interpreted through a broader lens. Instead of reinforcing old narratives of inadequacy, they become information, feedback, refinement. This shift in interpretation protects coherence. Aligned action also involves restraint. Not every opportunity requires pursuit. Not every invitation demands acceptance. When identity is anchored in worthiness, there is less compulsion to prove oneself. This absence of compulsion preserves energy and reinforces stability. Over time, this stability becomes recognizable to others. People respond differently to someone who moves from centered intention rather than scattered urgency. Manifestation, in its most mature form, is not about controlling outcomes, but about stabilizing identity. When the future self is embodied consistently, reality reorganizes around that identity. Relationships adjust, habits transform, external circumstances begin to reflect the internal order. The process may unfold gradually, yet each aligned action reinforces the new frequency. As the embodied future self becomes familiar, the distance between desire and experience shortens. What once felt aspirational begins to feel natural. And in that naturalness, manifestation ceases to be a technique and becomes a way of living, an ongoing collaboration between inner alignment and the unfolding rhythm of life. The quiet power of becoming. At the heart of quantum manifestation lies something far more intimate than technique. It is not about forcing reality to comply with desire, nor about endlessly repeating affirmations in the hope that the universe will finally respond. It is about becoming internally coherent enough that your life begins to mirror the order you cultivate within. Frequency is not something you chase. It is something you stabilize through awareness, emotional integration, and embodied identity. Throughout this journey, you have seen that manifestation begins in the invisible layers of belief and biology. Your nervous system learns from repetition. Your emotions memorize familiar states. Your body broadcasts signals long before words are spoken. When these layers align, when thought, feeling, and action move in harmony, life responds with a different texture. Opportunities feel more synchronized. Decisions feel clearer. The path forward feels less like resistance and more like collaboration. There is a quiet dignity in this process. Growth does not require urgency. Transformation does not demand perfection. It asks for presence. As you continue evolving your inner narrative and embodying the future self you once imagined, the gap between who you are and who you are becoming begins to dissolve. Now pause for a moment and reflect. If your life continues to reflect your dominant frequency, what identity are you rehearsing each day? If this message resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and continue watching the next video on your screen, where we deepen this journey of alignment and conscious creation together.